So, you got a big celebration coming up, and all you can think about is, man, we got to have some bubbles. But here's the question. Are you better off buying the cheap, value-priced bottles of real champagne from France, or are you better off buying a really good quality Cremant D'Alsace, which is also from France and made exactly in the same way as these guys? We're going to answer that question coming right up. Los geht's! Hey guys, Barron Belts, the wine missionary here. So when it comes to celebration, don't we love to have sparkling wine? Sparkling wine just adds a pizzazz to a celebration. And so one of the things I want to talk about today is like a little bit of the differences when it comes to sparkling wine and champagne. So number one, in order to be called a champagne, as you'll see here, so this says champagne on the label, champagne, 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 just in case you missed it. And then I don't even know how many times on the back label, look, when a sparkling wine comes from Champagne, they tend to be pretty proud of it, as they should be. There's an amazing history of making champagne in, well, Champagne, a little redundant, isn't it? So in order to be called a champagne, you have to, first and foremost, actually be made and come from the Champagne region of France. So that is about, I don't know, like an hour and a half east of Paris, if I've kind of got my geography going good there. The amazing thing though is that champagne is a sparkling wine, okay? But all sparkling wines are not champagne. Why? Because of what I just said. It has to come from the Champagne region of France. So here's another region of France that I want to talk about, and we're actually going to do a little comparison today. So these two sparkling wines come from an area called Alsace. So the Alsace region is very well known worldwide, especially for their white wines. They're still white wines. They have Grand Cru wines that are just amazing. They age terrifically. But this area is also known for what is called Cremant D'Alsace. So this literally means the Cremant sparkling wine from Alsace, the Alsace region. Now, Alsace is literally just across the Rhine River from where I live. So literally in 45 minutes, I can be in Alsace, France. And this is where they produce these Cremants. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare two wines that are both Brut, which Brut means that it's dry, okay? And then I'm going to compare two Rosés next to one another. But here's what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out, are you better off buying the cheapest real champagne from Champagne, France, okay? So as an example, this is 12.99 euros at Lidl, 12.99. Guys, maybe times have changed, but I don't even remember being able to touch a real champagne from France in the USA for less than $25 retail. So, okay, $12.99, right? And then when it comes to Rosé champagne, here we're talking about, trying to remember, $17.99. $17.99 real champagne that is Rosé. Again, Rosé in the USA, much more expensive than just your regular Brut champagne. So really, these two are the least expensive champagnes that you can buy. And so what I want to compare with is these two Alsace wines are about middle price when it comes to Alsace Cremant. And I just want to compare them and see, is it really worth buying the cheapest champagne? Or are you better off getting a little bit more expensive Alsace, Cremant D'Alsace, where you might actually get a better value? So, well, let's get started. All right, so the first one I'm going to pour is from François Lipp and his winery. It's a bio winery, so actually nearly everything they produce is organic wine, which is pretty cool. But he makes Pinot Noir. He makes many different white wines as well, as you would imagine, coming from Cremant. And so this is what is called Prestige, is the name that and the label's awesome. I'm really not a label guy, but this one's really beautiful. So this is a Brut, which means that it's dry. This wine, the sparkling wine, is made from 50% Pinot Blanc and 50% Pinot Noir. Now you'll see that the grape varieties are a little bit different among these four wines, but when it comes down to it, this is a white sparkling wine that is labeled a Brut, which means that it's dry. So proper way to pour, although it's a little dangerous because, you know, it could just fall out or fall off your hand, but anyway, it looks quite elegant, is to just put your thumb in the punt underneath and then just caress, hold the bottle this way. This way the label is facing your wife, in this case, of 21 years. Hey honey, would you like a glass of sparkling wine? Cremant D'Alsace. So you just want to pour it slowly because you don't want it to come bubbling over the tip of the glass. So I'm just going to pour it to where the mousse, which is what that's called, not bubbles, but mousse, I'm just going to pour it to where it came to the top of the lip. And now I'm going to open the champagne, the real champagne. And as you can see, I've got these sparkling wine stoppers on each of the bottles. The reason I do this is because even just with the few minutes that we were preparing for this video, I didn't want them to lose any of the bubbles inside, because that's what happens. Just like Coca-Cola and whatnot, you're always losing bubbles. So there's the Cremant, and then we have the champagne. Stop there, let the mousse rise there. So the first thing I'm going to do is just look at the color, and I'm also looking at the bubbles. One of the things about good champagne is that it will have tiny, tiny bubbles. That's one of the hallmarks of champagne that has been produced and aged very well. So I'm comparing here, guys, I can, like right from the very beginning, I can tell you that the Cremant D'Alsace is so much prettier in the glass. The bubbles are much, much tinier, and they're purling up. So that literally means like if it was a pearl necklace on beads, that's the way it looks coming from the bottom of the glass. Very, very pretty. Whereas the champagne, I mean, guys, it literally looks like ginger ale. So it's got some big bubbles. They're just kind of sticking to the side of the glass. Bubbles just kind of flying up haphazardly. So yeah, big difference in just looking at the two. Color-wise, they're not that much different. The champagne is just maybe just a teeny shade darker, but for the most part, they really have about the same color. Now, when it comes to grape makeup, these wines are quite different actually. So the Champagne Brut, that's actually from Champagne, this is made up of a blend of Chardonnay, a white grape, Pinot Noir, a red grape, and then another grape called Pinot Meunier. And just a quick trivia note, that's called Schwarz Riesling in Germany. Pinot Meunier is. Anyway, okay, that's for another day. So these three grapes are the ones that are traditionally grown and used in Champagne. Champagne has lots of laws and these sorts of things, and so that is part of the law. Now the blend of these can differ, and there can be a great variety of the blend of these three grapes, but keep in mind, some of you may be asking, well, Barron, how come that's white champagne, but you just said this has two red grapes in it? Great question. It's because when you squeeze the juice and the flesh from out of the inside of a red grape, you'll actually notice that flesh and juice is clear. So yeah, a lot of people don't know that. Red wine gets its color because of the juice being in contact with the skins, which is where all the pigment is. So there's the difference. And like I said, with the Cremant, this was 50% Pinot Blanc and 50% Pinot Noir. So, all right, let's smell both of these now. You know, a lot of people say you're not supposed to swirl champagne before you taste it or smell it, so I'm just going to do that. So the best word I can come up with this Cremant is it's very polite. It's very floral, so it's like white flowers when I smell it, and then like a little bit of like a white pear, maybe a little hint of apple in there too. So let's smell the champagne. Wow. Okay, so super different, which doesn't really surprise me, but the champagne, we're talking much more dry in the nose, so not as many fruit components there. Really what I smell here is like, it's kind of like bread, like fresh baked bread. It kind of has that aroma. Really, that's about the only aroma that I get from the champagne. Now let's taste them. Wow. So, quite mouth-watering, the Cremant. Again, I would say it's very polite, so it's not aggressive, it's not super dry. More of those same flavors coming through, so I would say like white pear, has a little bit of like maybe a golden apple coming through. And then, you know, as far as the finish, it's very light bodied, so it's not a rich style whatsoever. Very light bodied, very pleasant finish. Man, this would be a crowd pleaser. Like, I mean, a lot of people would like this style of sparkling wine because it really doesn't taste super dry either. But yeah, winner. I really like that. So back to the cheap champagne. Oh, I didn't mention the François Lipp is, and we'll put this information below, but this is 10-20 euros a bottle. So 10-20 versus 12.99, the cheapest real champagne that I could find. Well, the first thing that I can say about it is that there's nothing wrong with it. So there's not like a flaw or anything like that, but there's nothing that stands out about this champagne. It has the name champagne on it 18 times, like I mentioned just a moment ago. It would be funny to actually count them, you know, buddy. Anyway, okay. So it has champagne plastered all over the label. So it has that going for it. But when it comes to the flavor profile itself, it's like, it's very generic tasting. It's even hard to describe. It just really tastes like a generic white wine, like kind of like a Pinot Grigio even, I would say. No offense, Pinot Grigio drinkers. It's just, there's just not a lot of much going on there. And really, even when it's in the palate, like, you don't even feel the sparkles or anything. It's just kind of there. So, man, this is an easy one for me. Like, François Lipp at, you know, €2.70 or whatever, cheaper all day long versus the cheapest champagne. So, well, there you go. There's the first one. So let's move on to the Rosé. All right, so with the Rosé, what I have here is I have one from Emile Beyer. This winery is actually in the Alsace as well, actually in a little town called Eguisheim, which is just a really cool village. And I should have mentioned that with François Lipp, that his winery is actually up the mountain just a little ways from this little town. It's actually called Husserein les Chateaux. So there's actually like chateaux, 3 chateaux that are on top of this mountain. Anyway, it's cool. Look it up. Wikipedia it. Trust me, it's really cool. So I've got these little champagne stoppers, as I mentioned before. I really like these. They're super cheap, but they're super helpful just to keep the bubbles going in your wine. And while I say that, I am going to reseal this one because I've been enjoying that one. I'm being honest with you, like the champagne, it's so generic, I'm just not even interested in having a glass of it, unfortunately. But you know what, maybe someone else will. So I'll put it back in there anyway. Okay. All right, so with the Emile Beyer, this one is 100% Pinot Noir, and the cost is €14.20. So that's the cost of this one. For the real champagne, this is a blend. This is actually all 3 champagne varietals, just like the original champagne was. So this one has Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier, all 3 of those in it. And so this one is $17.99. I bought this one also at Lidl, a large grocery store chain here in Germany. So let's get started. The other thing I wanted to mention as I pour this is that the process for making the champagne, so in other words, the second fermentation undergoes within the bottle. This is why you have the effervescence and so on. But the champagne method, or the champagne method as it is called, is the same method that's used in Champagne, France, and with these Cremant D'Alsace. So same method, that's important to note. So it's not the method is the reason why champagne is so much more expensive typically. Has a lot to do with the fact that the champagne is just worldwide famous. All right, so we're going to get a look at both of these as I've just poured them. So I'm not surprised at all, by the way, first of all, that the Beyer, the Cremant Rosé, has a little bit richer color since it's made from 100% Pinot Noir. As I mentioned, this Rosé has some Chardonnay in it, which would help to change the color a little bit there. But I'll get into champagne making methods later. Don't really have time to get into it. I'm going to pour a little bit more in this glass just because I want to kind of look at them side by side. Yeah, so the main difference here is with the Beyer, as far as like the, just looking at the color, it has a little more of like, rosé color for sure, but it also has a little bit of a hue of gold to it as well. Whereas the Champagne Rosé is much more of that classic, kind of really light salmon type hue. Even a little bit brighter, I would say. As far as the bubbles are concerned, both of these have tiny, tiny bubbles. The Champagne Rosé is just much busier. It just has a lot more bubbles, and it has some pearling as well. And then I look at the Beyer. The Beyer has tiny, tiny bubbles as well, just not as busy. Just this glass has a lot more bubbles in it than this one. But both are pretty, so both of these are, quite beautiful to look at. So now let's smell them. Yeah, so the Beyer, like right off the top, it's like strawberry, red cherry. Yeah, a lot more strawberry. It's like a beautiful, fresh, ripe strawberry. Smells delicious. And then with the Rosé Champagne. Yeah, so again, very interesting to contrast and compare. So much like the other champagne, this one doesn't have so much of the fruit characteristics as much as it does like kind of those, like that kind of fresh baked bread, kind of that yeasty character to it. Yeah, maybe just a hint of like, yeah, maybe just a hint of like red cherry, like way in the background, but it's not something that's, you know, right up front. So let's taste the Beyer Cremant D'Alsace Rosé. Yeah, forgot to spit on that one. Oh, that's delicious. So, wow, really mouth-watering. Much like the François Lipp Brut here, very mouth-watering. The fruit characteristics of this sparkling wine. So on the palate, it's a little bit different than the aromatics, which isn't isn't a strange thing, but I would say it's more like a like dried cherries is kind of what the sensation of what I taste is more like a dried red cherries. I would even say like dried strawberries. So if you're thinking like, you know, like cereal or muesli where you have like, you know, some dried fruits, like that's what that reminds me of. But don't think super sweet or syrupy or anything like that. It's just these nuances that are there. The Beyer is quite dry on the palate. I would say light to medium bodied. But again, I would say the style of this wine is just, it's very, very approachable, very easy to drink. People that like white wine would enjoy this. And people that like Pinot Noir will love this because it will remind them of Pinot Noir for sure, as it should. Okay, so getting into the Champagne Rosé. Yeah, so amazing how different the nose are on these. You know what, guys? For $17.99, I'm really pleased with the champagne. Sometimes when you just buy the cheapest of whatever you can get, as you guys know, so many times the quality just isn't there. You may get the name, but maybe the quality isn't there. Here, this actually has quality going for it. So on the palate, it has like, I would say like some, again, dried red cherry is kind of in the background. It's also quite dry, and I would also say like light to medium bodied. But both of these taste delicious. The Emile Beyer just to me has more of a fruit characteristic than does the Champagne Rosé. But man, this is a stylistic preference when it comes right down to it. So stylistically, I like real rosé champagne. That's just what I've always loved. And for 17.99 euros, I'm really impressed by this bottle. It's a little out of my price range, but in order to do this tasting, I wanted to do it right just to show you, give you an idea, is it really worth the extra money to spend on, you know, for instance here, like I mentioned, with the Beyer Rosé, $14.20 versus $17.99. So when it comes right down to it, is it worth the extra nearly 4 euros for the real champagne, the rosé? In my opinion, I would say yeah. I would say it is. The rosé is the champagne is delicious actually, but I don't want to take away from the Beyer because stylistically it's doing exactly what it wants to do. It wants to remind Pinot Noir drinkers why they love Pinot Noir, especially when you make it into a Cremant D'Alsace. So, hey, when it comes right down to it, like, okay, Barron, so what's the answer to the question? The answer to the question is yes and no. So I would tell you, personally, for my opinion, definitely go with the Cremant D'Alsace when it comes to a Brut that you're looking for in sparkling wine versus the $12.99 cheap champagne. It looked cheap, smelled cheap, tasted cheap. And so I say that is the clear winner here. When it came to the Rosés, man, you know, stylistically for me, the clear winner is here. But I have to tell you that as far as like from a party and a celebration standpoint, the Beyer will actually be something that will appeal to everybody. Everybody can enjoy this. But kind of your real champagne guys, they're the ones that are going to like that the most. So again, comes down to, is it worth that extra money? Well, in this case, it depends on who you're looking to please. If I'm looking to please me, I buy that. If I'm looking to please my wallet, I buy that. So I hope this has been good, guys. I hope it's been fun. I hope it's been informative. Will you please give it a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it? Will you please subscribe if you haven't already done that? You'll also see some other episodes that we'll put up here. Maybe that would interest you. One of those would be how to properly and safely open a bottle of champagne. We'll have that video available for you. And then as always, you can find all the information about each of these wines and the things that I've been using during this tasting below. So with that, until next time, I'll say cheers.